Christmas is great. But the problem with Christmas is that it sets a standard that it itself can never live up to. Christmas equals happiness, right? So any sliver of discontent during the season tends to wedge that sense of happiness in twain. Slowly at first. I'm a bit tired. That's a shame on Christmas. Then a bit more aggressively. Oh, my lips are a bit chapped. How is that possible on Christmas? And before you know it, every crooked picture frame and every low-hanging ornament contributes to your slide down the ever-downward spiral, that spiral greased with disappointment, sprinkled with shards of shattered expectations. And when you land at the bottom, disillusioned and exhausted, and you see that final straw in the camel it murdered lying in red snow, you pause, and you reflect on the unmoving camel, the quiet, almost peacefulness of it all. Maybe things aren't so bad, you think, but then you look closer. That's not a straw that broke the Christmas camel's back. That's a Christmas-themed video game, and suddenly you're once again filled with rage, because after all this, you know the game you hold in your hand is most certainly a broken, shoddy cash grab, but you decide to play it anyway, because it's boring down here at the bottom of your spiral with your only company being a dead camel. At least that's my family's tradition. Do you have any fun traditions? Let me know in the comments below. In this video, I'm going to talk about 5 such Christmas camel straws. That metaphor has become so strained, you could probably just put one more piece of straw on its back to break it. That was like a meta-metaphor. Anyway, these are 5 games that take the fun out of Christmas. Home Alone 2 on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. While itself not necessarily a Christmas game, its source movie property is absolutely a Christmas movie, perhaps one of the best of all time. And I know I'm treading dangerous waters here, because if this is a Christmas game, then shouldn't the Gremlins and Die Hard games be Christmas games? Probably, but they aren't on this list, because in those games you don't get attacked by sentient luggage and evil vacuum cleaners. In Home Alone 2, you sure do. A Home Alone game shouldn't be a basic platformer. That's the primary problem with this game. A Home Alone game should be more of a Hitman-style game, mixing stealth and puzzles to take down enemies. However, Home Alone 2 on the Super Nintendo was released in 1992, well before the Hitman series of games. Though I will point out, well after Castle Wolfenstein and Metal Gear, games that lay the foundation for stealth action in video games. So the concept was there, but the motivation to execute on such a game wasn't there. It's a movie tie-in. Motivation was likely more monetary than passionate. Oh, I should also mention all of the entries on this list are retro games, because Christmas is all about nostalgia and planting the seeds of future nostalgia by consciously articulating happiness at every possible moment. It's a very delicate balance to keep Christmas in our heads as this wonderful, amazing time. A lot of work goes into that. In fact, evolutionary psychology would say that nostalgia is a survival tactic that highlights good times of the past while dulling the bad as a way to keep us motivated to move forward. Come to think of it, I wasn't that tired earlier, and my lips weren't that chapped. But I do remember that great coffee. The second game on this list, Christmas or Holiday Lemmings. To qualify for this list, the game doesn't have to be bad in the traditional not fun or broken sense. Worst can mean that the idea of the game is bad. Such is the case with Christmas Lemmings. Now, Lemmings is great. It's a game about navigating a group of tiny, thoughtless beings from one end of a level to another. The trick is that these lemmings mindlessly walk in one direction, only changing when the player instructs them to do so. The player can make lemmings dig, build stairs, detonate dynamite, and more in order to navigate the level and win. And Christmas Lemmings, which is just lemmings with a Christmas veneer, is fine, mechanically speaking. So why is it on this list? Because it forces the player to acknowledge their participation in the mindless ceremony of Christmas. Christmas shopping, specifically. With regular non-Christmas lemmings, you're able to distance yourself from the absurdity of the lemming lifestyle, which can be summed up as do whatever the rest of your tribe is doing, even if it's objectively dumb and could lead you to your lemming death. But with Christmas Lemmings, we humans who participate in the holiday are forced to see ourselves as the lemmings. You could speed the game up to 120 frames per second and you've essentially got a Black Friday simulator. The third game on this list, Days Before Christmas. Now, Days Before Christmas is probably the most playable and best looking game on this entire list, but don't let those positive marks fool you. The game is still bad. In it, you play as Santa Claus running across 24 levels. The level overworld is an advent calendar, which that's pretty clever. You run across 24 levels battling mice and penguins and snowmen and bird bat things and more, searching for stolen presents so that you can give those presents to the boys and girls of the world. Oh, and you're also rescuing Santa's kidnapped elves. But those elves are trapped in some of the presents you are collecting. So did the thief take the time to put the kidnapped elves in gift boxes? Or did Santa do that himself? That's weird, Santa. Or maybe it wasn't Santa and it was instead the evil Anti-Claus whom you turn into after drinking some kind of weird anagram coffee. Anagram coffee, from Santa to Satan in one sip. So you take back presents and rescue elves, but how do the elves find their way back to Santa's workshop? They seem to get on okay, except sometimes they don't. Like this one, who just bounces back and forth between barriers like a mindless lemming. Oh my. The lemmings are Santa's elves. I've killed so many of them. I didn't know. Days Before Christmas was originally released on the Sega Mega Drive in 1994 and later ported to the Super Nintendo, but was never released in the US. You're welcome, the US. Game number 4 on this list, Bible Adventures for the Nintendo Entertainment System. What's more Christmassy than the Bible? Except for fir trees, ornaments, lights, presents, hot cocoa, meals with the family. Okay, so we as a society have distanced ourselves from the holiday's origins, which makes Bible Adventures all the more fitting for a spot on this list, as it's distanced itself from what constitutes a quality video game. Bible Adventures is a series of 3 smaller games, each based on stories from the Bible. You know the stories, they've been told thousands of times over for generations. You've got the story of the superhuman strength guy who carries animals over his head. You've got the story of the mom who carries a baby over her head through a pyramid full of angry baby-hating spiders. Oh, and everyone's favorite, the other story about the superhuman strength guy who carries animals over his head. If you'd like to learn more about Bible Adventures, I highly recommend this book, Bible Adventures by Gabe Durham. It's really good. And the last game on this list, Toe Jam and Earl for the Sega Genesis. Whoa! I imagine you are angrily shouting, "That's not a Christmas game!" Well, true, but like Christmas, this game's defining characteristic for many participants is the presents. Toe Jam and Earl is full of presents. And like Christmas, those presents are often full of undesirable items. Here you've got rose bushes, to spring shoes, to tomato storms, to clouds that follow you and zap you with lightning. You know, presents. Toe Jam and Earl makes me dislike presents. Presents are a part of Christmas. Therefore, Toe Jam and Earl makes me dislike Christmas. A little. But Toe Jam and Earl is still a bad game, and it's my list. A lot of people love Toe Jam and Earl, so me calling it a bad game, and I'll reiterate, I am calling it a bad game, could get a lot of people upset. I feel the game is too randomized, too slow, and too unforgiving to be championed as great, and that the reason most people look so fondly upon it is because it's zany in a way that so many games of the early 90s tried to be, but failed to be. Hip-hop inspired aliens exploring a pseudo-Earth and Earth perceived, how aliens might really perceive Earth and its inhabitants as they look for pieces of their broken spaceship is zany and interesting. The execution here is what fails, not the early 90s ethos. I have hopes that a game like this made with current tech could be good. So much so that I backed the forthcoming Toe Jam and Earl Back in the Groove game from Human Nature Studios. That's 5 games that I feel are at worst terrible Christmas games, and at best they simply ruin Christmas. Do you have any terrible Christmas games to contribute to the list? If so, tell us in the comments below. If not, still use the comments below to convince me that Toe Jam and Earl is a good game. I want to love it, I do. So help me.